31 days. Everybody keeps saying 30, so let me fix that right now. 31. From the evening of January 14th to the morning of February 14th, a Tuesday to a Friday. I scratched a line into the windowsill every morning when the light came in, and I counted those scratches twice before they pulled me out. So 31 is correct. The building was the Aldgate, on East Willard Street in Baltimore. 15 stories. Built in the 70s, I think. Maybe early 80s. Brick and poured concrete. Flat roof. One elevator shaft. One stairwell on the east side. 4 units per floor on most floors. 6 on the lower 3 because those units were smaller. The elevator was the kind that broke twice a year even before everything happened. And the stairwell was a poured concrete shaft, metal handrails, a heavy fire door on each landing with one of those narrow wire glass windows. 26 steps per floor, 13 to the half landing, turn, 13 more. I know that number like I know my phone number. I used to count them every time I came home because the elevator was out so often. My apartment was 14D, 14th floor, northeast corner. 1 bedroom, maybe 600 square feet if you're generous about the closet. The bedroom window faced east over the parking lot, and then the roofs of the row houses beyond it. The living room window faced north toward the rail yard. Or what used to be the rail yard, it's been a gravel lot for years. Those 2 windows are how I stayed connected to what was happening outside, which is a funny word for it, because mostly what was happening outside was nothing. And then sometimes it was the worst thing you can imagine. And then nothing again. Before I get into the rest, where are you listening from? If you want your name in the next story, drop it in the comments. All right, let me keep going. There's 1 floor above me, the 15th, and then roof access from a separate door up there, so I wasn't on top. The people in 15A and 15B, I never knew their names. The woman in 15C used to smoke on the fire escape landing, and I'd smell it through the stairwell door sometimes. 14th floor had me in D, an older couple in 14A, the Nguyen's, a guy I never met in 14B, and 14C had been empty for at least 2 months when everything started. So on my floor, 3 occupied units out of 4, and one of those I couldn't tell you a thing about the person inside. Right. January 14th, a Tuesday. I had been home all day because I'd been laid off from my job. I did accounts payable for a restaurant supply company. Nothing exciting. They cut the whole back office in December, so I was home, on the couch, laptop open, half looking at job listings and half watching TV. The news had been strange for about a week. I know you know the timeline better than I do, but from my end, it was just the news being strange in a way I wasn't taking seriously. Footage from overseas, some domestic stuff that seemed exaggerated. I remember thinking it was like the early COVID coverage where everything felt both urgent and unreal at the same time except faster. And then, around 6 in the evening on the 14th, my phone started buzzing with alerts. The emergency broadcast kind, and the local stations cut to a live feed. And that was the last normal hour. The power went out at 4 a.m. on January 15th. Came back at maybe 7 a.m. I think the building had a small backup generator for the common areas, lobby lights, that kind of thing. And then it went out again around noon on the 15th. And it never came back. The elevator had already stopped during that first outage at 4 a.m. Some people in the building left that first night, the 14th into the 15th. I heard doors slamming, footsteps going down the stairwell, a lot of them in a hurry. I heard a car alarm go off in the parking lot around 2 a.m. and then voices shouting. You want to know why I didn't leave then? That's a fair question. I'll get to the stairs. But first, Phil Cooper, that's correct. For the recording or whatever you're doing, Phil Cooper, 14D, the Aldgate, East Willard, Baltimore. 43 years old, born in Dundalk. Is there a form for this, or are you just noting it down? Okay. So the water. You said you wanted to start with water. And that's fine because that was the main thing. Everything else I could manage, or at least I could tolerate it. But water was the constraint that every other decision hung on. The water stopped on the evening of January 15th. Day 2, if the 14th is day 1. I turned on the kitchen faucet around 7 p.m., and it sputtered for about 4 seconds, and then gave me a thin, brownish trickle, and then nothing. I tried the bathroom sink, same thing. I flushed the toilet. It flushed, but the tank didn't refill. And I remember standing there in the bathroom, the power was already out, so I was using my phone as a flashlight, and having this clear thought, which was that water in the tank is now a resource. That was the first time I thought in those terms. How much water did I start with? 2 bottles. Dasani, the regular size, 500 milliliters each, so a liter total. They'd been in the fridge. I also had maybe a quarter of a 2-liter bottle of ginger ale, and there was a can of chicken broth in the cabinet I hadn't opened. So for actual drinkable liquid on the evening of day 2, I had about 1.5 liters, call it 50 ounces, plus the toilet tank, which I measured later at just under 2 gallons. I used a coffee mug. The mug held about 10 ounces, and I filled it 7.5 times from the tank before it ran dry, so call it 75 ounces. But that water look, I knew it wasn't clean. I didn't have bleach. I didn't have any purification tablets. I didn't have a way to boil it because the stove was electric and the power was out. I had a candle, 1 candle, a decorative thing from the bookshelf, but you can't boil water over a candle. So the tank water, I knew I'd be drinking it as is if I drank it, and I put that off as long as possible. My system, you asked about the system. So here it is. From day 3 through day 7, I drank only the bottled water and the ginger ale, rationed to about 6 ounces a day. 1 mug in the morning, nothing until the next morning. That was brutal, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But my logic was that the clean water should go first while I was still strong enough to think clearly, and I'd shift to the tank water when I had no alternative. By day 8, the bottles were empty. I started on the tank water, same ration, 1 mug a day, 6 to 8 ounces. I drank it straight out of the mug without looking at it, because I didn't want to see if there was sediment. Day 8 through about day 16, I was on the tank water. That's roughly 8 days at 6 to 8 ounces per day, so I used maybe 55 ounces of the 75. That left me 20 ounces of tank water when I ran the numbers on day 16 and realized I had maybe 3 more days of it. And this is where the window comes in. You're asking about the condensation. Yes, I'll get to that. January in Baltimore, the temperature differential between the inside of the apartment and the outside was significant. Even without heat, the apartment stayed warmer than the outside air for the first week or so, body heat, residual warmth in the concrete, the insulation in the walls. By week 2, it was getting cold inside, but the windows still fogged up overnight, especially the bedroom window because I was sleeping in there and breathing. I woke up on day 9 or 10, I think it was day 10, and the window had these streaks of condensation running down the glass, and I just stared at them. And then I took a dish towel from the kitchen and wiped the window and wrung the towel out into a bowl. I got maybe a tablespoon of water, maybe less. It was almost nothing. But I kept doing it. Every morning, I'd check both windows, wipe them down with the towel, wring it into the bowl. Some mornings, I got a tablespoon. Some mornings, I got 2 tablespoons. And one morning, I think day 19, I got almost a full ounce because it had rained overnight, and the outside temp dropped hard, and the condensation was heavy. That was my best day for the window trick. Usually it was less than half an ounce. From day 16 to day 31, the window condensation plus the remaining tank water was all I had. I stretched the last 20 ounces of tank water to last from day 16 to about day 23 by cutting my ration to 4 ounces a day and supplementing with whatever the window gave me. After day 23, I was on window water only, and some days that was a tablespoon. Some days the window was dry and I got nothing. You want the total? I figured it out after. Over 31 days, I consumed approximately, and this is approximate. I didn't have measuring cups. I was using a coffee mug with a chip in the rim, about 200 ounces of liquid. That's roughly 6 ounces a day on average, but it wasn't evenly distributed. The first week I was closer to 8 ounces a day. The last week I was closer to 2 or 3. And there were 2 days in the final stretch where I had nothing at all. Day 28 and day 29, I think. Maybe 27 and 28. One of those pairs. By day 20, I couldn't stand up fast without everything going gray. By day 25, I was having trouble thinking in a straight line, like I'd start a thought. I'd think, okay, check the window, and then I'd be standing in the bedroom. And I couldn't remember walking there. Not blacking out exactly. More like my brain was skipping frames, if that makes sense. My lips were cracked. My tongue felt thick. I stopped producing tears. I remember noticing that on day 22 or so, my eyes just felt dry and scratchy all the time. Urination went from a few times a day to once every other day. And the color, yeah, you probably have clinical terms for that. It was dark. Very dark. By the last week, I wasn't sure my kidneys were still functioning correctly, and I didn't have the medical knowledge to know what that meant beyond it probably being very bad. The chicken broth, I should mention, sorry, I skipped that. I opened the can of chicken broth on day 12. It was about 14 ounces. I drank half of it that day and saved the rest for day 13. The sodium in it made my thirst worse for the next 2 days, which I should have predicted but didn't. In hindsight, I should have rationed the broth in smaller amounts across more days, or I should have saved it for later when I was in worse shape. That was a mistake, a survivable one, but a mistake. Anything else on water? No? All right, the stairs. Yeah, that's the question everybody has, and I know what it sounds like. 14 floors, 1 stairwell. Why didn't you just go down? What was stopping you? I'll walk through what I knew and when I knew it. On the night of the 14th, January 14th, I cracked my apartment door open, just cracked it. Maybe 3 inches, and listened. The hallway on 14 was quiet. I could hear footsteps below, people going down, and some banging from lower floors, doors being opened and shut hard. I closed the door and locked it. At that point, I was still thinking this might blow over, that it might be a night or two and then there'd be police or National Guard or something. I know how that sounds, but that's what I was thinking. On day 2, the 15th, I went to the stairwell door at the end of my hallway. Each floor has a fire door that opens into the stairwell from the hallway side. I pushed it open about a foot and looked down. From the 14th floor landing, you can see down about 2 floors if you lean over the railing because of the way the stairs zigzag. I could see part of the 12th floor landing and the 13 to 12 section of stairs. There was a body on the 12th floor landing, a man, face down, not moving, and I could hear something from lower, maybe the 10th floor, maybe the 9th. It was hard to tell with the echo, this dragging, shuffling sound, and occasionally a kind of moan or groan that would start low and then stop. I had never heard a person make that sound before, and I don't want to describe it more specifically than that. I went back to my apartment. On day 3, I checked again. Same body on the 12th floor landing, same sounds from below. But now I could also hear something on 13. A banging, like someone hitting a door with their hand, rhythmic, every 4 or 5 seconds. Bang, pause, bang, pause. It went on for hours. I listened from the stairwell door and from inside my apartment through the wall, because the stairwell shares a wall with my bedroom. That banging didn't stop until sometime on day 5. And when it stopped, the silence was worse because I didn't know if the thing making the noise had gotten through the door it was hitting or had just stopped for some other reason. On day 4, this is the attempt you're asking about, and on day 4, I decided I was going to try to go down. I hadn't eaten much yet. I still had water. I was physically fine. I put on my shoes, my coat. I put my phone in my pocket even though the network was already spotty. And I went to the stairwell door. I opened it slowly. The banging on 13 was still happening at that point. I looked down, and the body on 12 was gone. Moved or been moved, I don't know. The landing was just empty. And I started down. I made it 3 steps, 3 actual steps, 1 landing's worth, and then I heard a door open below me. A stairwell door, the heavy kind with the hydraulic closer, and I heard that closer hissing as the door swung. And then I heard footsteps that weren't normal footsteps. They were shuffling and fast and going up, coming up toward me. I went back up those 3 steps faster than I've ever moved. Through the 14th floor door, closed it behind me, held it shut. It doesn't lock from the hallway side. That's a fire code thing. But there's a handle and I just held it. Whatever it was came up past 14. I heard it go past the door, still shuffling, going up toward 15. After that, I heard it moving around on 15 for a while, and then I didn't hear it anymore. That was day 4, and I did not go back to the stairwell for 17 days. I want to give you a reason that sounds calculated, like I assessed the risk rationally and decided the probability of encountering infected in a 14-floor descent was too high given the potential outcomes. And yeah, that is part of it. That is a real piece of the reasoning. But mostly I was scared. That's the word. Scared. Whatever was coming up those stairs, its footsteps sounded wrong, and the speed of it was moving faster than a person walks upstairs, and it wasn't breathing hard. Or if it was, I couldn't hear it over the sound of my own breathing, because I was holding that door shut, and my heart was doing about 160. So from day 4 to day 21, I did not open the stairwell door. I checked the hallway a few times through my apartment peephole. I could see a small arc of the hallway, my door, part of 14C's door across the hall, and a section of carpet. Most days there was nothing to see. On day 7 or 8, no, day 8. I'm sure it was 8 because that's when the last neighbor stopped answering. On day 8, I looked through the peephole, and there was a figure standing near the stairwell door at the end of the hall. Standing still. It was dark, no power, so I could only see a shape, backlit by whatever ambient light was coming through the stairwell door's window from the floors above, where maybe some daylight filtered down. It was just standing there. I watched it for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe longer, and then it moved toward the stairwell door and went through it, and I heard it going down. After that, I saw movement in the hallway through the peephole maybe 6 or 7 times over the whole 31 days. Never more than 1 at a time. Never for very long. They seemed to move through the building up and down the stairwell, through hallways without pattern. Sometimes I'd hear one on my floor for an hour. Sometimes a week would go by, and I'd hear nothing in the hall. The stairwell was more active. Through the bedroom wall, I could hear movement in the stairwell almost every day for the first 2 weeks, then less frequently, and by the last week it was rare. But rare isn't never, and I couldn't see into the stairwell from my apartment, so I never knew if the path was clear or not. There's another thing about the stairs, and it's the math of the floors. 14 flights down, 26 steps each. That's 364 steps. If the stairwell is clear, that's maybe 4 minutes at a normal pace, 6 if you're being careful about noise. But if any floor's door is open and there's something on that floor that hears you, or if there's an infected person sitting on a landing, I saw that body on 12, and who knows about the floors I couldn't see. Then you're not making it past that floor without either getting past them or turning around and going back up. And going back up when you're already 8 floors down means you've spent all that energy for nothing, and now you're weaker and in a worse position. The risk wasn't just encountering one. It was encountering one on floor 6 and then being stuck between 6 and 14, with no water and no food, and something behind you and something below you. You're asking about the door, my front door. Yeah, I'll tell you about that. I sealed it. Not heavily, not with furniture or anything dramatic. On day 3, I took a bath towel and rolled it up and pushed it against the bottom gap under the door, because I was worried about sound traveling. My apartment door was a standard hollow core door with a deadbolt and a chain lock. Nothing special. The deadbolt I kept locked the entire time. The chain I kept on. The towel I pushed against the base. I pulled it back when I checked the peephole and then replaced it. Later, around day 10 or 11, I also put a folded blanket against the door because I was sleeping in the living room by then. I'd moved my sleeping spot from the bedroom to the living room because the living room was warmer, smaller, and I wanted an extra layer between me and the hallway. Could something have gotten through that door if it wanted to? Absolutely. One good kick, probably 2, and the chain would break and the deadbolt would fail. These are not secure doors. What kept me alive wasn't the door. It was that nothing on the other side knew I was there, or if it knew, it didn't care enough to try. I was very quiet. No music, no talking well, no talking to anyone. I did start talking to myself, but I'll get to that. I walked in socks. I didn't cook anything that produced a smell after the power went out, because I couldn't cook. So there was no stimulus coming from my apartment that would attract attention. The apartment was, as far as the hallway was concerned, empty. And most of the activity was in the stairwell and on the lower floors. Up on 14, it was mostly still. The Nguyens. You want to know about the Nguyens? Yeah. 14A, the opposite end of the hall from me. An older couple, 60s maybe. I'd lived next to them for 3 years. She was Lian, he was Fong. We weren't close. We'd say hello in the hallway. He helped me carry a bookshelf up the stairs once when the elevator was out. That kind of thing. On day 1, the night of the 14th, I heard them through the wall their apartment shared my living room wall. I could hear them talking, not the words, but the sound of a conversation, a TV on, normal evening noises. On day 2, same thing but quieter, no TV. By day 3, I heard what sounded like knocking, but from their side, like they were knocking on someone else's door, maybe 14B or maybe on mine. But the knock was on the shared wall, not the front door, and I couldn't tell. I knocked back. 2 knocks on the wall, quiet, and I got 2 knocks back. That was day 3. We did that for 5 days. Morning and evening, I'd knock twice on the wall, and they'd knock twice back. Sometimes there was a gap of a few hours, and I'd wonder if something had happened. And then I'd hear the 2 knocks, and I'd feel this. I mean, it was communication, right? The most basic form of it. Are you there? Yes, I'm here. That's all it was. Day 8 was the last time I got a knockback. Morning, I knocked twice, got 2 knocks. Evening, I knocked twice, nothing. I waited an hour, knocked again, nothing. I knocked the next morning. Nothing. I kept knocking, morning and evening, for 3 more days, and I never heard anything from 14A again. Is that relevant to your study? The psychological part, you mean? Yeah, I'll tell you what it did. It took the last piece of external confirmation that I wasn't alone in the building. I mean alive, alone, and alive. And it removed it. After day 8, I had no evidence that any living person was in the Aldgate besides me. I could hear the infected moving sometimes, but that's different. After day 8, I was the only person I could verify as alive within the range of my senses. You want to know what I did about it? Nothing. There was nothing to do. I couldn't go to their apartment. Their door was down the hall, past the stairwell door. And even if I could get there, what was I going to do? Knock on their front door and hope for the best? What if they'd been infected? What if they'd tried the stairs and hadn't come back? What if they'd been dead for hours by the time I noticed the knocks had stopped? I ran through these possibilities on day 9 and day 10, around and around, and then I stopped because there was no answer that changed what I could do, which was nothing. What did that cost me? I don't know how to quantify that for your research. If you want a number, I'll say this. From day 8 on, I talked to myself, full sentences out loud, at a low volume, narrating what I was doing. Going to the window now, checking the condensation. Got about a teaspoon. It's Tuesday, I think. I did that every day until I was pulled out. I don't know if that counts as a psychological effect or a coping strategy or what. You can categorize it however you want. For me, it was the sound of a human voice in the apartment, even if it was mine, and that was enough for me to need it. Let me go to food and the routine since you've got that on your list there. When the power went out on day 2, I had in the kitchen a box of spaghetti about 3/4 full, a jar of peanut butter, maybe half full, the normal-sized jar, a sleeve of saltines that was open, maybe 20 crackers left, a can of black beans, the can of chicken broth I mentioned, 2 cans of tuna fish, a bag of rice, small bag, maybe 2 pounds, a box of instant oatmeal, 4 packets left. In the fridge, I had some lunch meat, a block of cheese, condiments, half a head of lettuce, a couple of eggs. In the freezer, a frozen pizza and a bag of frozen vegetables. The fridge stuff I ate first, on day 2 and day 3, because it was going to spoil. The lunch meat and cheese I ate on day 2. The eggs I ate raw on day 3. I cracked them into a mug and just drank them, which is about as unpleasant as it sounds. But I didn't have fire to cook them, and I wasn't going to waste them. The lettuce I ate on day 3, too, for the water content as much as anything. The frozen pizza, I let it thaw and ate it cold over 2 days, day 3 and 4. It's edible. Not good, but edible. The frozen vegetables I thawed and ate on day 5. Just plain handfuls of half-frozen peas and corn. After the perishables were gone, I was on the dry goods and canned stuff. Here's where the rationing started. I sat on the kitchen floor on day 5. By that point, I was spending a lot of time sitting on the floor to conserve energy. And because it felt safer, lower to the ground, less visible through the windows, even though nobody was looking. And I laid out everything I had left. The spaghetti, the peanut butter, the crackers, the black beans, the 2 cans of tuna, the rice, the 4 oatmeal packets. I did not have a way to cook the spaghetti or the rice without boiling water. I didn't have water to spare for cooking, and I didn't have heat. So the spaghetti was useless. I tried eating it dry on day 6, just snapping off a handful of uncooked spaghetti and chewing it. And you can do it. It takes a long time to chew and it's like eating sticks, but your body can digest it, and it has calories. My system was 1 meal a day, eaten in the late afternoon, around when the light was starting to fade so I'd have something to look forward to during the daylight hours. For the first 2 weeks, one meal a day meant a spoonful of peanut butter, 4 or 5 crackers, and either half a can of something or a handful of dry spaghetti. I made the canned goods last by eating half a can per day and covering the open can with a plate, no cling wrap, no foil, just a plate on top, and finishing it the next day. The black beans lasted 2 days. Each can of tuna, 2 days. The oatmeal packets I mixed with a tiny amount of water, maybe 2 tablespoons to make a paste, and ate 1 packet every 3rd day. By day 15, I was out of everything except the peanut butter, the dry spaghetti, and the rice. The peanut butter was maybe 1/3 of the jar. The spaghetti, about half a box. The rice I still couldn't cook, and eating dry rice is worse than dry spaghetti. It's like eating gravel and it doesn't break down the same way. I tried soaking it in a little water overnight, and that helped some, made it soft enough to chew, but I couldn't justify the water. I tried soaking it in the condensation water, the tablespoon or 2 from the window, and that was so little liquid that the rice just sat there barely damp. So from day 15 on, my meal was a spoonful of peanut butter and a few pieces of dry spaghetti, once a day, sometimes every other day toward the end. The peanut butter ran out on day 24. After that, dry spaghetti and dry rice, and by then I was so weak that chewing the spaghetti took real effort. My jaw would get tired. That sounds like a small thing, but when your jaw muscles are fatiguing from chewing pasta, that tells you something about what shape your body is in. Calories, you're asking about calories. I estimated it after, working backward from what I remember eating. For the first week, I was probably getting 400 to 500 calories a day. Weeks 2 and 3, maybe 200 to 300. The last week, 100 or less on the days I ate, and 0 on the days I didn't. Over 31 days, that's something like 8,000 or 9,000 calories total. A normal man my size, 170, 5'10", should be eating something like 2,200 a day. So I took in about 4 days' worth of food over a month. I lost weight. A lot of weight. When they pulled me out, I was 138 according to the intake scale. That's 32 pounds in a month. The routine. Let me talk about the routine, because you asked and because the routine is what kept the days from collapsing into one long blur, even though they partly did anyway. Wake up at first light, whatever time that was, January in Baltimore, so maybe 7:15, 7:30. Check the bedroom window for condensation. Wipe it down with the towel, wring it into the bowl. Walk to the living room. Check the north-facing window, same process. Combine whatever I collected into the bowl. If I was going to drink water that day, and toward the end, I wasn't drinking every day, this is when I'd do it. 1 small drink from the mug or the bowl. Then I'd check the peephole, stand there for a few minutes, look at the hallway, listen. Then I'd knock on the wall. This was while the Angoyans were still answering, so days 1 through 8, and wait for the response. After day 8, I still knocked, for another few days, and then I stopped, because it was too hard to hear nothing come back. After the morning checks, I'd sit. I sat a lot. On the couch, on the floor, in the corner between the kitchen counter and the wall. I'd sit and I'd be still. Sometimes I'd do stretches, push-ups when I had the energy, just to keep my muscles from atrophying completely. That lasted about 2 weeks. After day 15, I didn't have the energy for push-ups. I'd just stretch slowly and walk the length of the apartment, which was maybe 30 feet from the bedroom window to the living room window, back and forth, 10 laps. Done. In the afternoon, I'd eat, if it was an eating day. Then I'd check the windows again for outside activity. The bedroom window overlooked the parking lot, and from the 14th floor, You can see a long way 4 or 5 blocks of row house rooftops, parts of the street. I watched the street every day. The first few days, there were people down there running, driving, some emergency vehicles. By day 4, the street was empty most of the time. I'd see an infected person walking along the sidewalk occasionally, or a group of them standing in the intersection of Willard and Greer doing nothing. Just standing. Cars stopped in the middle of the road with doors open. A dog once, on day 12 or 13, trotting down the center line of the street. That was the last living animal I saw until the extraction. Evenings, I'd move back to wherever I was sleeping, living room couch from day 6 on, and I'd do a last peephole check, a last listen at the wall, and then I'd get under the blankets. I had a comforter, 2 fleece blankets, and a coat I wore over my clothes while sleeping. January, no heat, 14th floor, the apartment dropped to maybe 45 degrees at the coldest. Could have been lower. I didn't have a thermometer. I could see my breath at night from about day 5 on. The coldest stretch was around day 15 to day 20, when there was a cold snap outside, and inside the apartment, it felt close to freezing. I wore every piece of clothing I owned to bed. 3 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of sweatpants, 4 shirts, the coat, a scarf wrapped around my head, gloves. I did not develop frostbite, but my feet were numb most mornings during that stretch, and I'd have to rub them for 5 or 10 minutes before I could walk without stumbling. You want to know about the waste situation? Yeah. Okay. The toilet flushed once after the water stopped. On day 2 because the tank was still full. After that, it wouldn't flush. I made a decision on day 3 to stop using the toilet and start using plastic bags. I had a small box of kitchen garbage bags, the white kind, 13-gallon, maybe 12 bags left in the box. I'd use a bag, tie it off, double bag it in a second bag, and put it in the bathtub. By the end, the bathtub had, I'm going to say, 19 bags in it, maybe 20. The bathroom door stayed shut except when I was adding a bag. The smell was contained, mostly. By week 3, when I opened that bathroom door, the smell was bad enough that my eyes watered. And that's saying something because by then I was barely producing tears. I breathed through my scarf when I went in there. You're asking about the urine specifically. Same system. Bags. Except for the first week when I was still using the toilet bowl. After that, bags. I know this is clinical. That's fine, you're a researcher. This is what the data looks like. By the last 10 days, I was producing so little urine that 1 bag lasted 2 or 3 days. The body conserves what it can. Okay. Key decision points. You mentioned you had specific days you wanted to ask about, so go ahead. Day 5? Sure. Day 5 was the day I decided to stay. That's how I think of it now. The first 4 days, I was still in the mode of this is temporary, someone will come. The situation will improve. On day 5, I sat on the kitchen floor with my food laid out in front of me, and I did the math in my head. And the math said, if I eat half of what a normal person eats, this food lasts 10 days, maybe 12. If I eat a quarter of what a normal person eats, it lasts 20 to 25. If I eat even less than that, I might make it to 30. And then what? I didn't know. But the decision wasn't really about the food. The decision was, am I going to try the stairs, or am I going to commit to waiting this out? On day 4, I'd tried the stairs and it went badly. On day 5, I chose to wait. And the thing about that decision is that it felt less like courage and more like I don't know. I was tired. I hadn't slept well in 3 nights. The adrenaline from the stairwell the day before had worn off and left me feeling empty. I didn't choose to stay because I calculated the optimal strategy. I chose to stay because I didn't have the energy to be scared of the stairs again that day. And by the next day, It was easier to just keep staying, and by the day after that, it was a pattern. Is that useful for your study? That the decision that probably saved my life felt like giving up at the time? Because it did. On day 5, sitting on that kitchen floor, I felt like I was giving up. The stairs were right there. The stairwell door was 40 feet from my front door. 14 flights, 364 steps, maybe a 4-minute trip in normal conditions. And I couldn't make myself try again. So I told myself I was rationing, I was being strategic, I was waiting for conditions to improve. But the engine behind the strategy was fear and exhaustion. I'm telling you this because I figure you should have the real reason alongside the rational one. Day 11. What about day 11? Right. Day 11 was when I heard the helicopter. Midday, maybe 1 p.m. Hard to tell without a working clock. My phone had died on day 4. I should have said that earlier. The phone lasted until day 4 on the charge it had. I'd turned it to airplane mode on day 1 to save battery, and it still only lasted until sometime on day 4. So by day 11, I'm estimating time by the light angle through the windows. Midday, roughly. And I hear a helicopter. Distant at first, getting closer. And then it's close enough that the windows vibrate a little. I go to the north-facing window, and I can see it, a military helicopter, flying low over the neighborhood, heading west. It passes over the building and keeps going. I waved. I stood at the window and waved both arms, and I know there's no way anyone in that helicopter could have seen me. 14th floor of a random apartment building. One guy in a dark window waving his arms. But I waved anyway, for about a minute until it was gone. I heard helicopters 2 more times after that. Day 17 and day 23. The one on day 17 was farther away. I only heard it, didn't see it. Day 23, I saw it again. Different direction, heading southeast. Same thing, I waved. It kept going. And I sat back down. Day 11 was also when I found the cooking oil. This is the resource you're asking about. The one I overlooked. In the kitchen cabinet, way in the back, behind a bag of flour I'd completely forgotten about. The flour was opened and had been sitting there for months. I didn't trust it. There was a bottle of vegetable oil, maybe 12 ounces. I don't cook much, which is why it was shoved in the back. I'm not proud of this, but on day 11 I drank cooking oil, about a tablespoon. It has 120 calories per tablespoon, and by day 11 I was already rationing hard, so that bottle represented maybe 1,400 extra calories spread over the remaining days. It tastes exactly how you'd expect. Thick, greasy, coats your mouth. I could only do a tablespoon at a time without gagging, and I spaced it out to every 2 or 3 days. A tablespoon per dose through the end. That oil kept me going longer than anything else in the apartment except the peanut butter. The flour, you're wondering about the flour. I tried it on day 20, mixed it with a tiny bit of water to make a paste like raw dough, and ate about 2 tablespoons of it. It tasted like wet chalk. I ate flour paste 3 or 4 more times after that, small amounts, mixed with even smaller amounts of water. Calories are calories at that point. Day 21. That was the second time I tried the stairs. You want to know about this? Yeah. By day 21, the building had been quieter for about a week. I hadn't heard movement in the stairwell through the bedroom wall since day 18, and I hadn't seen anything through the peephole since day 16 or 17. My thinking was, and I have to be upfront, my thinking by day 21 was not sharp. The dehydration was affecting my concentration. My thinking was that maybe the infected had migrated out of the building, that maybe there was nothing in the stairwell anymore. And if I didn't at least check, I was going to die in the apartment of thirst or starvation within the next 10 days anyway. So I went to the stairwell door. I opened it. Very slow, very quiet. I listened. Nothing. Just the concrete echo of an empty stairwell, that faint hum that big, empty, enclosed spaces have. I looked down over the railing. 12th floor landing was empty, just like before, but without the body this time. I could see down to about the 11th floor. Empty. I took one flight down, 26 steps, 13th floor. The fire door on 13 had a window, and through the window I could see partway down the hallway. The hallway was dark, but there was some daylight coming through an apartment. At the end, the door was open, and through the open door I could see a window, and the window let in enough light to show me the hallway floor. There was something on the floor, a lot of something, dark shapes. I couldn't tell if they were bodies or clothes or debris. The floor was covered with it, whatever it was. I stood there looking through that window for a long time. I didn't open the 13 door. I didn't go down another flight. Because here's the thing, even if the stairwell was clear, I had 13 more floors to go, and at the bottom I'd be in the lobby. And the lobby had glass doors to the street. And I didn't know what was on the street. I'd seen the infected standing in the intersection from my window. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have anywhere to go. Out of the building, and then what? That's the part that people don't think about. Leaving the apartment wasn't the problem. Getting out of the building wasn't the problem. The problem was what happens after. You're on the street in Baltimore in January. You're dehydrated. You're malnourished. You weigh 140-something pounds. You have no phone, no transportation, no destination, and you're surrounded by an unknown number of infected. The apartment was miserable, but it was enclosed and it was quiet, and nothing was trying to get in. The street was open and unknown and full of things that would kill me. So I went back up, 26 steps, back through the 14th floor door, back to my apartment. And I want to say this. I was angry at myself when I got back. Not scared this time, angry, because I felt like I was making the same decision I made on day 5, and I still couldn't tell if it was the smart decision or the cowardly one. Maybe both. Maybe it doesn't matter. Let me jump ahead. You're asking about the apartment itself, the physical space, what 31 days in it does. All right, I'll try to answer that. By week 2, I knew every crack in the ceiling. I knew the exact pattern of the water stain above the bathroom door. I knew that the floorboard in front of the kitchen counter creaked if you stepped on the left side, but not the right side. I knew that the living room window had a draft that came from the lower right corner where the seal was degrading, and I'd stuffed a sock in it on day 9 to block it. I knew that the bedroom closet door wouldn't close all the way because the frame was slightly warped, and it would swing open about 2 inches if you didn't prop a shoe against it. These details became the territory of my life. The apartment was 600 square feet, but I had it mapped down to the inch. I knew which spots on the floor were warm near the shared wall with the stairwell. The concrete held a tiny bit of residual heat for the first 2 weeks, and which were cold. I knew that the kitchen counter, if I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet under the sink, was the most sheltered spot in the apartment from drafts. That's where I ate most of my meals, back against the cabinet, knees up, bowl or can in my lap. By week 3, I started having trouble with my sense of time in a different way than just not knowing the hour. I'd wake up, and it would take me a moment to figure out which day it was, and I'd have to go to the windowsill and count the scratches. One morning, day 24, I think, maybe 25, I counted the scratches and got 23, and I had this spike of panic because I was sure I'd scratched a line that morning, and the count should have been 24. And then I realized I'd miscounted, and counted again, and got the right number. But that moment of panic, the idea that I'd lost a day somehow, that stayed with me for hours. I also started narrating my movements out loud around day 8, like I said, but by day 20 it had evolved into full conversations. Not hallucinations, I knew I was talking to myself. But I'd ask myself questions and answer them. What are you doing? Checking the window. Any condensation? A little bit. Are you going to drink today? Tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Because there's more rice left than water, so water is the limiting factor. And I should have it when I eat, not on an empty stomach. And so on. It was organized, practical talk. But if you'd heard me through the wall, you'd have thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. The line between coping strategy and early deterioration is probably something you have a professional opinion on. For me, in the moment, it was just the sound of someone making decisions. And even though that someone was me on both sides of the conversation, it helped me not freeze up. There's another thing I want to mention about the psychological side, and it's the window, the north-facing window in the living room. By week 3, I was spending 2-3 hours a day just sitting by that window, looking out. Not watching for anything specific, just looking. The rail yard, the roofs, the sky. Birds, when there were birds. Cloud patterns, the way the light changed in the afternoon. I fixated on it. There were days, day 22, day 23, when the only thing I did between morning condensation check and afternoon meal was sit by that window. And I'd be there so long that my legs would go numb, and I'd realize I hadn't moved in 2 hours. That window was the only evidence I had that the world was still out there, that there was something larger than 600 square feet. And I clung to it in a way I'm not sure I can explain in clinical terms for your study. The object. You asked earlier about an object I used in an unintended way. The shower curtain rod. It was a tension rod, the kind that you twist to extend and it presses against the walls. On day, what was it? Day 14 or 15, I took it down because I needed something I could use to reach the top of the kitchen cabinets. There was a space above the cabinets, between the cabinet tops and the ceiling, about 8 inches. I'd put stuff up there when I moved in and forgotten about it, a box of plastic bags, a roll of paper towels, a small plastic bin with some junk in it. Getting a step stool would have been easier, but I didn't have one, and I was too weak to pull myself up on the counter safely. So I used the shower curtain rod to push things around up there and knock them forward to the edge where I could reach. The plastic bin had a pack of gum, a dead battery, some rubber bands, and this is the part that matters, a box of bouillon cubes. Chicken bouillon, 12 cubes, the little gold-wrapped kind. I'd put them up there at some point, and completely forgotten. 12 bouillon cubes. Each one is meant to dissolve in a cup of hot water to make broth. I didn't have hot water. I didn't have much water at all. But each cube is salt, fat, and about 5 calories. And more importantly, you can just put one in your mouth and let it dissolve on your tongue. And for about 10 minutes, you have flavor. You have salt. You have the sensation of eating something. The calories were negligible, but the salt helped with the muscle cramps I'd been having since about day 12, and the psychological effect of having something with flavor in my mouth after 2 weeks of dry pasta and raw flour paste was enormous. I rationed them to 1 every other day, made the box last through day 30. So that shower curtain rod got me the bouillon cubes. If I hadn't taken it down, if I'd just sat there not thinking about what was on top of the cabinets, I might not have made it to the end. Or I might have. I don't know. But the salt from those cubes stopped the cramping in my legs at night. And the act of unwrapping 1 every other evening became a ritual, became something to wait for. And having something to wait for turned out to be as important as having something to eat. Day 25. You want to talk about day 25? That was when I heard the gunshots. Midday, maybe a little after, based on where the sun was, a series of pops from the direction of the street, the east side, the parking lot side. I went to the bedroom window and looked down. I could see a vehicle, a truck, dark-colored, stopped in the intersection at Willard and Greer, and two people standing next to it. And one of them had look from 14 floors up. You can see shapes, but not faces. But I could see a person raising something to shoulder level and pointing it. And then the pop sound again. And I could see infected in the intersection falling or scattering. The truck was there for maybe 5 minutes. The people got back in, it drove west. And that was it. Two things about that. First, that was the first time in 25 days I'd seen living people doing something intentional. People moving with purpose. People using tools. People in a vehicle that was running. It confirmed that the world outside was still functioning. Somewhere, at some level. Second, I didn't try to signal them. The bedroom window doesn't open. It's a sealed unit, double pane. I could have broken it. I had the shower curtain rod. I had shoes I could have thrown at it. But breaking the window in January with no heat would have made the apartment uninhabitable within a day, probably within hours. The temperature was already low 40s inside. Remove the window and you're at outdoor temperature, which in late January in Baltimore is mid-20s at night. I'd freeze before thirst got me, and this is the part that's hard to say by day 25. I wasn't sure I could shout loud enough to be heard 14 floors down. My throat was dry. My voice was this thin, scratchy thing from dehydration and from not using it for anything except muttering to myself. Even if I broke the window, even if I leaned out and screamed, I don't think they'd have heard me over the truck engine and the gunshots. So I watched them drive away, and I sat back down on the bedroom floor, and I didn't break the window. And an hour later, I was back at the north window, looking at the sky, same as every other afternoon. Was that the right call? I genuinely don't know. If I'd broken the window and they'd heard me and come up 14 flights of a stairwell that might not be clear, then what? They're risking their lives for one guy who can barely walk. If they hadn't heard me, I've destroyed my shelter for nothing. I chose to keep the window intact. It felt rational at the time. But day 25 was, that was hard. Watching the truck leave was hard in a way that the hunger and thirst weren't, because the hunger and thirst were constant and you just sort of absorbed them into your baseline, but watching possible rescue drive away and choosing not to try for it, that was a specific, discrete moment of loss. You're asking about the smell inside the apartment. Yeah, I'll answer that, sure. By week 3, the apartment smelled bad. The bathroom was the worst. Obviously, the bags in the bathtub, even doubled up and tied off, produced a smell that permeated the bathroom door. But the apartment itself also smelled. I smelled. No shower for 3 weeks. No change of clothes except to add layers for warmth. The same body and the same sweat, and the same breath in the same 600 square feet for 20-plus days. I stopped noticing it around day 18 or 19, which I think is just olfactory fatigue. Your nose gives up. But when I opened the bathroom door to add a bag, the differential between the apartment air and the bathroom air was enough to make me gag every time. The living room window, the one with the bad seal in the lower right corner where I'd stuffed the sock that let in enough outside air to keep the living room somewhat ventilated, which is probably why I moved my sleeping spot there. Small draft of cold air, but fresh. A trade-off. Day 28, the final stretch. You're asking about the final days, so let me go through this carefully, because the sequence matters, and my memory of days 28 through 31 has some gaps that I want to be honest about rather than fill in with guesses. Day 28, I did not drink any water. The condensation that morning was almost nothing, maybe half a teaspoon, that I licked directly off the towel because it wasn't worth wringing. I ate a bouillon cube. I had 3 pieces of dry spaghetti, which at that point took me maybe 15 minutes to chew because my jaw was so fatigued and the pasta was so hard. I remember sitting in the kitchen spot, back against the cabinet, chewing, and my vision going blurry around the edges in a way that might have been dehydration or might have been low blood pressure from sitting too long in one position. I couldn't tell the difference by then. Day 29, same. No water from the window. It had been dry overnight. I remember checking and the glass was just cold. No moisture. I ate nothing. I didn't have the energy to chew. I dissolved a bouillon cube on my tongue over about 20 minutes, and then I just sat. I was in the living room by the window, and I remember thinking very clearly, this is one of the moments I remember with total clarity. I remember thinking, if I don't drink something in the next 2 days, I will die in this apartment, and nobody will know I'm here, and the scratches on the windowsill won't mean anything to anyone because nobody knows I'm counting. That thought didn't produce panic. It was flat, factual, like noting the weather. Today is cold. Tomorrow will also be cold. If I don't drink, I'll die. The information just sat there in my head without producing action. And that scared me more than the thought itself. The flatness of it. The lack of urgency. I'd been so deep in conservation mode for so long, burning so little energy, moving so little, speaking so little, that even the thought of dying soon didn't activate anything in me that felt like a survival response. Day 30. This is okay. Let me be careful about the sequence here because something happened on day 30 that I need to describe accurately. Early morning, first light. I got up from the couch. It took me a long time to stand up. My legs didn't want to hold weight. I shuffled to the bedroom window to check condensation. And there was some more than there'd been in several days, maybe because it had gotten colder overnight, or maybe because I breathed more on the glass in my sleep. I don't know. I wiped the window, wrung the towel, and got, I'm going to say, about 1.5 ounces, maybe 2 ounces. Relative to the previous 5 days, that was a lot. I drank it immediately, didn't save it, just drank it right there standing by the window with the towel in my other hand. And then I looked out the window down at the parking lot, which was habit by this point, automatic. And I saw something different. There were vehicles in the intersection that hadn't been there the day before. 3 of them. Large vehicles, military-looking, the flat green color. And people, multiple people, in uniform, moving around the vehicles, and I could see them going in and out of the row houses across the street. I watched for about an hour. They were going systematically. It looked like building to building on the block across from the Aldgate, moving in groups of 3 or 4. I couldn't hear them at first, but around what I'd guess was 9 a.m., I started hearing voices, distant, and a loudspeaker or megaphone. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence of an amplified human voice, repeating something. They didn't come to my building on day 30. They worked the other side of the street all day. I watched from the window off and on, sometimes from the living room window too, for a different angle. By late afternoon, they'd moved to the next block east, and I couldn't see them anymore. But the vehicles stayed in the intersection overnight. Day 31, February 14th, morning. I checked the window condensation, very light, barely worth the effort. I went to the bedroom window and the vehicles were still there. And now there were more of them. and I could see people in the lobby of my building. Through the parking lot, if I pressed my face against the glass and looked down at a steep angle, I could see part of the ground floor entrance, the glass doors. And there were people there, soldiers, 2 of them. And they were pulling the glass door open, or maybe it was already broken. I couldn't tell from the angle. I heard them in the stairwell, boots on concrete, voices, the sound of doors being opened on lower floors. And then this took hours, because they were clearing floor by floor, I figured out later, checking every unit. It took them most of the morning to get to 14. Sometime around midday, I heard the 14th floor stairwell door open, and I heard boots in the hallway, and voices calling out something like, "Hello, anyone here? Military. We're here to help," something in that register. I did not go to the door immediately. That's the thing. And you might think after 31 days, after all of it, why wouldn't you run to the door? But I didn't. I sat on the couch, and I listened to them knocking on doors down the hall. I heard them try 14A. I heard them try 14B. They were knocking and then forcing doors when nobody answered. I heard the sound of a door being kicked or pried. Then they came to 14C, the empty unit. Same process. And then my door. 3 heavy knocks, a voice loud and clear through the door. "United States Army, is anyone inside? We are conducting a building evacuation." I got up, walked to the door. It took me maybe 15 seconds to cross the living room because my legs were that slow. Took the towel away from the base of the door, unhooked the chain, turned the deadbolt. Opened it. There were 2 of them. Younger than me by a lot. Helmets, gear, flashlights, even though the hallway had some light filtering from the stairwell. One of them said something, "Sir, are you okay? Are you injured?" Something like that. And I said yes. Or no. I don't remember which I said. I think I said I'm okay, or I'm here, or something basic. And the other one said, "We need to get you downstairs. Can you walk?" And I said I didn't know. They helped me down. 1 on each side, my arms over their shoulders. 26 steps per floor, 14 floors, 364 steps. I counted, even then, on the way down, out of habit. The stairwell there were things on the stairwell that I saw going down that I'd rather not describe in detail for your recording. Bodies, not recently dead. On the 9th floor landing, and again between 6 and 5, the soldiers moved me past them quickly, and I kept my eyes on the steps. The lobby had broken glass all over the floor from the front doors. Daylight. Real full daylight. Coming in. And it hurt my eyes because I'd been in a dim apartment for a month with only window light. They put me in a vehicle, someone gave me water, an actual plastic bottle of water, and I drank the whole thing in about 30 seconds, which apparently isn't safe to do after severe dehydration, because I threw most of it up a few minutes later. And then they gave me another one, and told me to sip. That's the extraction. That's how it ended. They were clearing the neighborhood building by building. They'd been in the area for 2 days. If I'd broken my window on day 30 and shouted, they might have heard me. Probably would have. 1 day earlier, and I could have gotten their attention without the window. They were right there, across the street. But I didn't know that on day 30, looking down at them. I knew they were there. I knew they were clearing buildings. But I didn't know they'd come to mine next. I thought they might skip it, or not get to it for days, or not get to 14 even if they entered the lobby. So I didn't break the window. I waited 1 more day, and they came on their own. And if they'd gone the other direction that morning, if they'd turned east instead of coming to the Aldgate, I'm not sure I had another 3 days in me. The condensation was running out because the temperature differential was equalizing as the apartment got colder. The food was spaghetti and flour. The water was functionally gone. Day 31 was about the limit. You want the thing about the Nguyens? I know you do, because you keep coming back to the neighbor question, and I keep circling it. So here, when the soldiers were clearing the 14th floor, before they got to my door, I heard them go through 14A, and I heard one of them say something to the other one. I couldn't make out the full sentence through my door, but I heard the word deceased. Afterward, at the intake center, I asked. Both of them, in the apartment. They'd been dead for the estimate I was given was approximately 3 weeks, which means they died around day 7 or 8. Which means the last time they knocked back, day 8, they were alive. And sometime between that evening knock and the next morning, they weren't. What happened to them, I was told it was likely dehydration. They were older, 60-something. Same situation as me, same building, same resources, except they were older and probably started in worse physical condition. And they had each other, which you'd think would help, but 2 people need twice the water. Do I think I could have helped them? No. I don't think so. What would I have done given them my water? Then I die on day 20 instead of making it to 31. Gone to their apartment. Through a hallway I didn't know was safe. To give them what? A mug of toilet tank water? And yet, the knocking stopped on day 8, and I knew I didn't admit it to myself until later. But somewhere in my body, I knew what that silence meant. And I kept knocking for 3 more days anyway, because I wasn't ready to let the silence be the final answer. Your question about regret. Yeah. Look, if I'd gotten to day 5 and they'd knocked and I'd decided right then to go to them, to combine resources, to share the apartment or share theirs, maybe we all make it. 3 people pooling food, sharing body heat in a smaller space, staying sane through company. Maybe. Or maybe the noise of moving between apartments attracts something from the stairwell, and all 3 of us die on day 6. I can make the argument both ways. The decision I actually made was to stay behind my door and knock on the wall twice a day and feel less alone for 8 days, and then feel totally alone for the remaining 23. That's the data point for your study. A man who chose isolation, had partial contact for 8 days, lost it, and endured the rest by himself. Is there a pattern there in your other interviews? Do most people choose the door or the wall? That's not a real question. You don't have to answer. I'm just, the wall. Something else about the psychological piece that I haven't said. Around day 20 or 21, after the second stairwell attempt, I started having what I'd describe as not exactly dreams, because I was awake for most of them. More like the kind of thoughts you have right before falling asleep, where reality and something else kind of blend together. I'd be sitting by the window, and I'd be watching the sky, and then I'd realize I'd been having a detailed imaginary conversation with someone, my mother, an ex-girlfriend, a friend from college, and I couldn't tell when the real watching had stopped and the conversation had started. It wasn't frightening. It was more like my brain was starving for input, the same way my body was starving for calories, and it was manufacturing something to fill the gap. Is that common? In your other interviews, do people report that? Okay. Yeah, I figured it might be. For me, by the last week, these episodes were happening multiple times a day, and sometimes I'd realize I'd been narrating a conversation out loud, not just talking to myself, but talking to someone who wasn't there, responding to things they hadn't said. I'd catch myself mid-sentence and stop, and the silence after was always worse than the silence before the conversation started. I also lost track of counting briefly, around day 26 or 27. I woke up one morning and went to the windowsill. and I wasn't sure if I'd scratched my line the day before or not. The scratch marks were starting to look similar, overlapping, and I'd been making them with a house key, just dragging the key across the painted wood of the sill, and some of them were deeper than others depending on how much pressure I used, and I had to count 3 times before I was confident. After that, I started making the scratch in the morning immediately upon waking, before I did anything else, so there'd be no question. What else? You're asking about sound, what I heard from outside, beyond what I've already described. The building was mostly quiet after the second week. Whatever was in the stairwell seemed to thin out. Maybe they left through the lobby. I don't know what happens to them, if there's nobody to go after, if they just wander off. The sounds from the street were minimal by week 2. No traffic, no voices, occasional gunfire in the distance, far off, blocks away, could have been anything. Once, around day 16, what sounded like an explosion, muffled, from the south. No sirens. After about day 7, I never heard a siren again. That absence was louder than anything I did hear. Inside the building, footsteps in the hallway. I mentioned those. Through the floor, from 13 below me, I'd occasionally hear a thud or a bump, especially in the first 2 weeks. Then less. The ceiling 15 above me, I heard nothing from above after about day 5. The woman who smoked, whoever was in 15A and 15B, I never heard them again after day 5. The cold. You want to know about the cold specifically. I touched on it before with the sleeping arrangements, but here's more detail. The building was concrete and brick, and concrete holds temperature reasonably well for a few days. The apartment stayed in the 50s for the first 3 or 4 days without heat, then started dropping. By day 7, I'd estimate low 40s. By the cold snap around day 15 through 20, I think it got into the mid-30s inside, though I can't be certain without a thermometer. That's below the point where you're at risk of hypothermia if you're inactive for long periods, which I was, so I was always in bed or bundled up. At night, under the comforter and blankets and coat. I was okay, not comfortable, but survivable. The risk was in the mornings when I'd get up and the apartment air hit me, and my body would be cold and stiff, and I'd have to move slowly to get blood flowing. The main strategy for cold was reducing the space I was using. By week 2, I was only really occupying the living room and the kitchen, which were one open area. The bedroom I visited twice a day for window checks and to sleep if it was warmer there for some reason, which it wasn't usually. The bathroom only for waste storage. I kept the bathroom door shut, the bedroom door shut at night, and I sat in the kitchen corner where the drafts were minimal, conserving body heat in a small pocket of space. It worked well enough that I never reached a point where I thought the cold would kill me before the thirst did. The thirst was always the more immediate constraint. One more thing on the physical side, and then I think, well, let me answer whatever else you've got. My feet. Around day 20, the skin on my feet started cracking. Dehydration, cold, lack of movement. I don't know the exact cause. The soles and the heels developed these fissures that would bleed a little, and walking became painful in a specific way that it hadn't been before. I wrapped them in socks, and then in the dish towels from the kitchen, using rubber bands to hold the towels on, and that helped with padding, but not with the cracking. By the last week, every step was deliberate because my feet hurt, and that slowness on top of the weakness from malnutrition meant that walking 30 feet from the couch to the bedroom window took me close to a minute. That matters for the stairwell question by day 25. Even if the stairwell had been perfectly clear, I'm not confident I could have descended 364 stairs without falling. My legs were unreliable, my balance was off. Going downstairs requires more coordination than going up, because of the impact on each step, and my feet couldn't absorb impact without pain that made me flinch, and flinching on stairs is how you fall. I think that's most of it. Is there the timeline of what I knew from outside? Right, let me run through that quickly. Day 1, the 14th. Alerts on my phone, news coverage, rapid escalation from isolated incidents to widespread. My phone showed me news and text messages until it died on day 4. My mother called me on day 2. I answered. She was in Delaware. She said, "Stay inside." I said I would. That was the last conversation I had with another person, until the soldiers opened my door. I texted a few people on day 2 and 3, but cell service was degrading fast, and most messages didn't go through. One friend in Virginia texted back on day 3 just the word "alive," and that was the last text I received. From day 4 on, all my information about the outside world came through those 2 windows. And what the windows told me was, the world stopped moving. Cars stopped. People stopped appearing. Lights in other buildings went out one by one over the first week. The row houses across the parking lot, some of them had lights in the first few nights, candles or flashlights, and by day 6 or 7, they were all dark. Whether that means those people left or died, or were just conserving batteries like I would have if I'd had anything to conserve, I don't know. And then day 30 and 31, the military vehicles, the soldiers, the extraction. Everything between day 4 and day 30 was silence and staring and counting scratches. Am I glad I didn't try the stairs earlier? You're asking whether in hindsight, knowing they came on day 31, do I wish I'd tried on day 21 instead of going back up? And the answer, yeah. The answer is complicated. If I'd gone down on day 21, I'd have been on the street 10 days before the military arrived in my area. 10 days in Baltimore in January with no food, no water, no shelter, no plan. Where would I have gone? Would I have found them, or found anyone? Or would I have been caught in the open by something that caught me? The apartment kept me alive because it was small and quiet and sealed. The street is none of those things. So no, I don't wish I'd tried earlier, but I also don't feel good about it.